Inflation has gotten so crazy that you may not be able to buy your favorite salty snack at your local Loblaws anymore because Loblaws has rejected Frito-Lay's proposal to raise prices amidst higher inflation. Which means the grocery chain is doing us all a favor by making it hard for Frito-Lay's to raise prices, but it also means I won't be able to get Doritos. So what does that mean? The definitive guide on how to manage your credit, product, penalty, price in that order. It's never been more important to get your mortgage right. With inflation creeping above 5%, the highest that it's been since 1991, is it time to start thinking about protecting your family from hyperinflation? Alright, welcome back. Today we're discussing hyperinflation. Well, kind of. Not actually hyperinflation. The reason why is because people misunderstand what hyperinflation really means. If you take a look at the definition, and I'll pop you into my screen here real fast, hyperinflation is when prices are going up extremely rapidly. That means up to 50% per month. And as many of you know, that's not where we're at with respect to inflation in Canada right now, nor is it likely ever to be a place that we are going to find ourselves. However, we are experiencing inflation. In fact, the highest amount of inflation that we have seen since 1991. That's right, in January, we crossed the 5% inflation mark for the first time in almost 30 years. And in today's video, I'm going to discuss how to protect yourself from rising inflation. But before we get into the video, do me that favor, hit that subscribe button and hit that notification bell. And please hit that like button so more people like you can see this video. It really helps out the channel a lot. And I sincerely hope that the information you're finding in these videos is valuable. And today I'm going to show you some of the ways that you can protect yourself against inflation. And yes, these are some of the things that I myself am doing and my family is doing in order to protect ourselves from rising costs. And what I think you're going to find is that in a lot of cases, it is quite easy to beat inflation if you're smart about it. So let's get into it. Let's discuss what's going on with inflation. First and foremost, we are seeing inflation that is at 5.1% for the first time since 1991. Those are really, really high numbers. Shelter costs have risen by on average 6.2%. Groceries have increased by 6.5%. And for the first time in basically the last 2 years, alcohol has gone up by 2.9%, which is the biggest increase we've seen in quite some time. And all of this is being compounded by higher gasoline prices, which leads to higher shipping costs, which means that pretty much every price of every good that is shipped in some way, shape, or form is going up. And while over the last 100 years, there have been many times where inflation has run quite hot, this is the first time in about the last 30 years that we've seen inflation be as high as it is. If you take a look at a chart going back to 1914, what you can see is that there's been many times where inflation has been quite high, but this period from 1991 till today has been relatively low with respect to inflation. And therefore, what seemingly is happening is many millennials and many young people who have never lived through high inflation periods are a little bit unsure of what to do. And that's why this video exists, because I want to help you with some of the things that you can do to hedge against inflation. Now, first and foremost, there's a whole bunch of things you can do to hedge against inflation. First of all, you can move your money from your bond portfolios to your stock portfolios, or weight your investment portfolios at least a little bit heavier in stocks while inflation is high. That one's quite obvious. The other thing that people should consider when it comes to inflation is if we're expecting inflation to run high for a long or an extended period of time, then owning a home is one of the single best things you can do to protect yourself from rising prices. Because when inflation is running hot, real estate is one of the things that almost always follows the trend lines of inflation. And while paying attention to the things that you own and the things you invest in is important, so too is making sure that your wages keep up with inflation. And what this often means in high inflation periods is that you should be on the lookout for new opportunities and higher rates of pay. Because while it may be hard to get a raise from an employer who's struggling with inflation themselves, finding a job with another employer who is just looking for talent and is willing to pay for it can be hugely beneficial to your bottom line personally. I remember distinctly many years ago, a mentor of mine who had lived through many, many years of inflation advised me that the single best thing you can do as an employee is to make yourself as valuable as possible to the employer that you work with and as marketable to future employers as possible. And by constantly looking, but not necessarily taking new jobs, you are always giving yourself the opportunity to make more money by either moving up the ranks within your own organization or jumping ship to another organization who may see your talents as more valuable than your current employer. Now, in addition to paying attention to your investments and paying attention to how much money you are earning in your current job and looking for future opportunities, another big piece of fighting inflation demons is to keep your baseline low. And what do I mean by keep your baseline low? Well, it's really simple. Try to make sure that your expenses aren't increasing very much over time. That means when you do get a raise or you do find a higher paying job, that you don't go and buy a new car or a bigger house or spend more money on things that you may not necessarily need to spend more money on. Furthermore, you can save a lot of money and keep your baseline low by being strategic in your purchases. One of my favorite books is Andrew Tobias's The Only Investment Guide You Will Ever Need. And while he talks a lot about stocks and other things in that investment guide, he also spends a significant amount of time at the beginning of the book talking about making smart purchases. And what do I mean by smart purchases? Well, I mean thinking strategically about how you buy things, like the things that fill your pantry. For example, most households have staples that they use pretty much every single week. For our family, we make pizza every Friday night, which means we always have tomato sauce on hand. But what most people don't realize is that the best investment they can make is in how they purchase things like the stuff that is always on hand. Because when you can get a really good deal on things that you are going to have stocked in your pantry, get 35, 50% off, for example, well, that's a 30 to 50% after tax return on your money just by investing and holding the things that you know that you're going to use long term. So, for example, let's say you always have Cheez-Its on hand. These are one of my favorite things. Well, if they go on sale for 50% off and they have a shelf life of a year or two, you can basically buy these and put them on your shelf knowing that you are going to use them and save yourself a significant amount of money. Also, things like toilet paper tends to go on sale quite often. And if you were to buy it and buy enough to last you for a year, not only are you fighting the increase in prices due to inflation, but you're getting a 30 to a 50% discount because you bought it on sale. Which means that your dollars don't just stretch longer because you're mitigating inflation, but because you're also buying strategically things that you know you are going to need to buy later on anyways. And yes, well, you may end up with $200 or $300 in toilet paper in your basement. The savings is significantly higher than any return you would be able to make for a year on that $200 or $300 invested in the stock market or anything else for that matter. So when it comes to inflation, the reality of it is having your money invested well, owning real estate, making sure that you're not paying too much for your mortgage are all things that are really beneficial. But the single best way to hedge against inflation is to actually buy things in advance that you know you're going to have to buy anyways and make sure that you get a really stellar deal on those items. And while you may not be able to stockpile things like gasoline because you don't have anywhere safe to store it, you certainly can stockpile out of season items like seeds and fertilizers for your garden in the summer, salt for your driveway in the winter, and any other number of things that can be strategically bought in the off season. And while it takes a little bit of planning goes a long way when it comes to your money. And making those savings will give you the ability to still be able to afford the life that you want to live while not being strapped down and having to pay far too much for toilet paper a year or two down the road. So if you found this video useful and you thought of a whole bunch of ways that you can save money, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button. If you are going to be in the market for a mortgage anytime in the near future, go ahead and sign up for our Rate Secrets course, which will save you thousands of dollars on your mortgage. Don't forget to hit the like button so more people like you can see this video, and we'll see you on the very next one.